right, so today, like I told you last night, this is a topic that God really used in my life over the last several weeks to, I think, just open my eyes and remind me that He's the one who calls us to do jobs. He's the one who gives us and gifts us to do different jobs. And it's not about the response that you get from individuals, it's about the worship that you do through the work. So the goal today is we're going to talk about guilt and judgment. And you're like, wow, this sounds like a psychology talk. It's not. I'm not licensed for that. But it is something that I believe that we all struggle with, because there will become times that we feel guilty that we're not doing a certain task. Why am I not as good as that individual? Why am I not as gifted in to-dos as that individual? Why am I not as gifted with the ability to dream as that individual? And then the judgment part, why do these people just not get the job done when I know they need to get the job done? You know, so for me, I'm a dreamer. I like to plan. I like to galvanize. I like to move things. And then there are times I get frustrated and I'm like, do these people ever try something new? And I'm like, that's judgment. So one of the things I want to tell you is that guilt and judgment are real. They're real. And I want to tell you that it's usually because of our ego that we judge or we're guilty. It's like, okay, I'm guilty because I don't feel like I'm good enough. So people aren't going to like me or love me because I'm not good enough. I'm not gifted enough. That's a lie from the devil. And then the other ones are our feelings. Like, I don't feel good enough today. Like, why can't I be like Trey? Why can I not be like Cade? Why can I not be like, Emily? Why can I not be like all these other people? But I'm not. I'm me. And your feelings get in the way. And your others is your fears. I think that's the big one when it comes to guilt and judgment is we're afraid. So we feel guilty because we're afraid that people are going to look at us that we were not good enough. But God says in the Bible, over and over, the Bible is replete. It's full of times where God says that He loves you, that He made you. Psalms 139, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. So judgment and guilt are there. They're real. So what we want to do today is we want to just talk about that in regards to the working genius. And the idea, I put this phrase down, and you've heard this before, mutual responsibility and personal accountability. So when you look at jobs, we're all mutually responsible to get the job done. That means all of our different elements to get the job done. One of my favorite movies is the movie Hoosiers. It could be that I'm from the state of Indiana. It could be that I have friends that were in that movie. It could be that my grandfather was in that movie. So the whole idea is, but one of the lines in that movie, he says, I want 5 individuals on the floor functioning as one single unit. And that's what work is. It's a group of people that have different skills, different roles, different responsibilities, functioning as one unit towards a common goal. So it's mutual responsibility, but it's personal accountability. Am I willing to do my role even though it's not getting recognition? Am I willing to do my role even though everybody else in the team doesn't seem like they care about my role? But am I doing my role? So it's mutual responsibility, personal accountability, and I put this down. Guilt and judgment are not always bad. This is the caveat. They're not always bad, but they do require you to have the proper attitude, clarity, and also really good discipline. What I mean by that is there are times that as a leader, you do have to judge the people that you're leading. And as a leader, you have to judge yourself. And there are times you will feel guilty as a leader because you dropped the ball. That is okay. It's not okay to be in the mud the whole time and act like a pig and just stay there in guilt and judgment. You have to have the right attitude. So let's jump in. And let's look at this from the working genius point of view. So here's the big idea. Ready? Comparison is a thief of joy. If you've ever had I'm trying to think of the professor who says this, but he's not the professor who said this, but it's a Guernsey. Dr. Guernsey always says this. Comparison is a thief of joy. It was said by President Teddy Roosevelt. And what he meant by that was that when you compare yourself to somebody else, you're robbing yourself of the joy of the abilities that you have. So the big idea here with judgment and guilt is to remember that comparison is a thief of joy. So when you look at the working genius, here is what it means by guilt. So personal accountability. At times you feel guilty, think and feel that you have failed or struggled because of this. Think of these if these resonate with you. Your attitude is bad. You're not smart enough, or you made a bad decision. Now, if your attitudes are bad, should you have a little bit of guilt? Yeah, you should. That's a good thing. But if you're feeling guilty because you're not smart enough, and you haven't taken the time to stop and go, well, maybe this isn't really a gifting that I have, then that's a problem. Bad decisions, perfection's a myth. Remember, we talk about that all the time. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay you want to be in an environment where you're allowed to make mistakes and grow from those. So you need to work on that. That was really funny. Did you hear that? Working genius and judgment. So when you judge others' performances or behaviors, you can erroneously, I love that word, it was in the book, conclude that your teammates are not trying hard enough. So when I judge somebody else, I'm like, why are they not getting this innovation? My first inclination, just to be honest, and this is right, they're just not trying hard enough. They're not working hard enough. They're not smart enough. Or they're not a good fit and they need to be let go. You see the danger of judgment? Is that the idea of is that God has gifted each of us in different ways. And it's very easy to see everybody else from our filter, from where we think we need to be. So how do we apply this? So let me jump right into that, and we'll talk about awareness first. The best leader is a self-aware leader. So the first thing that I really want you to understand that you need to do is understand the giftings. So look at the working genius. Where are you? So for me, I'm galvanizing in innovation. That's where I am. And then my third is discernment. So I know I'm going to live in those worlds. So tenacity. So Leslie is gone on maternity leave right now. And somebody had to do her task. So I got assigned her task. So I went from 100 and some tasks to 450 tasks in about a 2-hour time period because Leslie assigned all those tasks to me. Because I'm not tenacity, that almost paralyzed me. Actually, it did paralyze me for about an hour because I'm like, what? This is way too much stuff. What do? I can't do this. I can't get this done. I can't do it. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. Like I was just in this little cycle of like, I can't do it. Because I have to be aware of my working genius. So I took a moment and I was like, all right, I need to stop. What things need to be done today? How can I, using my invention and my galvanizing, how can I figure this out and lay this out in a different way? And in about an hour, I felt a lot better. I still feel overwhelmed that there's 400 and some to-dos still on my to-do list, but it's not as overwhelming. But when I go to judging, I was like, why in the world would Leslie do all this? Why can't she see that we don't need to talk about April when it's January? I started judging, and I'm like, wait a second. That's where she's gifted. So she was leading from her giftedness. So the way you need to be as a leader is to see where people are coming from, see where you're naturally gifted, and make sure you're not judging each other on that. So for me, I'm the only inventor in our full-time team. So there are times that I look at the full-time team and I feel like sometimes they just, and I'm just going to say it, if they were here, I would say the same thing. They just do the status quo. And that is so wrong. I judge them in that way. They're just not thinking about like, how do I dream new ideas? How do I do? It's my job as the leader, as the person with invention, knowing that awareness to push them to that. So that's the awareness. I need to be aware of mine. I need to be aware of my teammates. I also need to be aware of the stage of work that we're in. So when Leslie gave me all those to-dos for the summer's 6 months away. We're a little bit over 140 days away from when the first summer guest gets here. So with that is, we're really not in that bottom phase of work. That bottom stage of work, the implementation, we're more in the activation phase. So in understanding that, I didn't get as overwhelmed because I'm like, oh, I don't really need, even though Leslie says that's due tomorrow, they don't really need to know what dorm they're in until May. It's no big deal. Because usually you don't get your hotel room number until you get to the hotel. So like we're going to give them that in April and May. So I'm like, okay, I had to understand the stage of work that I'm in. But then I also had to figure out on my judgment and guilt meter, where was I? What am I feeling today? Am I aggravated today because the car wouldn't start? Am I aggravated today because the kids are acting up? Am I aggravated today because it's too cold? Am I aggravated today because I'm just aggravated today? Because knowing where you are and your feelings will help you understand, okay, am I going to be more judgmental today than I normally am? And I think being aware of that is really helpful. So awareness is the first thing. The next is buy-in. So here's some truths, and this is just one I want to give you. Work is hard. So there will be times that you judge people. You feel guilty. Work is hard. Work was not designed to be easy. But work is something that we see in the very beginnings of time when God created the heavens and the earth. If work was easy, then God is not as big as God is. I think when we're asked to work, we're asked to follow the example of God. Work is beneficial. Work is worship. Work is a process. A lot of you just like, let me get the job done. No, there's a process to the job. So when you start to make coffee, there's a process. You got to make sure everything's clean. You got to make sure you have the right ratios. Which I didn't this morning. So you got to make sure that you've got all the things ready that you need to. And that work is a process. It requires discipline, and it requires all the different levels of working genius. So people that wonder, people that ideate, people that galvanize, people that discern, people that are enablers and get things done, and people that are tenacity. It requires all of that. So that's the buy-in part of this. So how do we actually make this happen? And this was convicting. Be honest and communicate, and don't let things build up. I think the reason in my own life why I judge and I feel guilty is because I'm like, they've always done that. So Trey does something one day, then he does it another day, then he does it another day, and then 2 years from now I blow up at Trey. Because I'm like, Trey, you're always like this. And Trey's looking at me like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Because when you get historical, you get hysterical. Think about that. This is really true in marriage. Really true. When you don't talk about the things that are going on and you just keep them inside, even with friendships, and you keep them inside, it just builds and builds and builds, and then one day your judgment and guilt meter is really low because you're feeling really bad. You did bad on a test, and a friend says something off the cuff, and it sets you off, and you're like, Seth, you're always this way. And Seth's looking at you like, I just made fun of your hair. I don't know. You see what I'm saying? So, like, you've got to be careful not to get historical. You've got to be honest, and you've got to communicate. You got to be present. I think the reason why we judge people is because we're not always around them. So when I judge people, when I feel like they're not getting the job done, it's because I haven't been around them. I haven't seen the work that they're doing. I need to spend time with them. So as a leader, spend time with them. When I feel judgment towards our middle child who's our athlete, when I feel judgment towards her, it's probably because I haven't spent enough time with her. So go spend time with people. The other one is be humble. I think we're guilty and we judge others because we're like, well, why can't I be like Ian? Why can't I be like this person? Why can't I get this done? Celebrate others. Celebrate that others have different giftings than you do. Weston is a discerner more than I am, and he can see the patterns better than I can. And at times I'm like really frustrated with that, going, why does he always understand what the right thing is? And why is he always messing up my ideas? And then there's Leslie, who's really good at tenacity, and Chrissy. And I'm like, why can they just get things done and it stresses me out? Why can't I be like that? Why don't I just celebrate what God has done for them? So Chrissy's helping me with the project right now, and she got really excited. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. So, yeah, for the first time in Chrissy and I working in 10 years, I was like, oh, my word, this makes sense. I'm going to let Chrissy do this, and I'm going to sit back and just drink coffee in the office and let her work on it. And she's so excited. I was walking by the office yesterday. She called me and said, look what I've done. for this new ticketing system for a leave. And I'm like, cool, because you celebrate that. Don't have false humility either. I think a lot of times you can go the other way with judgment and guilt. And when somebody says, good job, Molly. And Molly's like, no, it's Jesus. Okay, we all know it's Jesus, all right? We do. And we can say that, but don't have false humility with that. Understand that in Matthew 5:16 it says, let your light so shine before others so that they can see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. It's okay, Cade, for them to see that you're a good videographer. It's okay, Carson, for them to see that you get graphic design. It's okay, Rachel, that you understand coffee and how to do scheduling, and everybody else doesn't, but you understand how to do scheduling, and it's okay to be that. Celebrate that. Be okay with that. Celebrate that that's how God gifted you. Don't have that false humility. I think as Christians, we have false humility, and we can't take a compliment. The other ones are three others, and I'm going to close and let you guys ask any questions, is work hard. If you're going to not judge and you're not going to feel guilty, is work hard at what you do. Be content in who God created you to be, and trust the process. So for me, last semester, I told you this last night, if you were there, November and December were down months for me. Not in a bad way, but I was in a funk. And I think the funk that I was in was the idea that I was like, why aren't people recognizing what we're doing? Why aren't people recognizing what I'm doing? It got into this ego thing, right? So that because my ego got in the way, I started judging other people. Well, why is this person doing this? And they're making me look bad. Or why am I not as smart as this individual to get this done? And I'm like, I was robbing myself of the joy that God had for me, because I was allowing my feelings, my ego, my lack of feeling appreciated get in the way of what the job was, which is creating things for other people. And look at the story of Jesus. I don't think people hung out with Jesus because he was Jesus, like just a person. I think they hung out with him, honestly. Some of them might have, but honestly, they hung out with him because why? He fed them. When somebody makes 5,000 people have food, it's like, that's a dude you want to hang out with. And then when somebody does a miracle and heals your cousin, yeah, you kind of want to hang out with them. But why would we think that the world would be any different for us than it would be for Jesus? And that's Romans 12. It's like, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. That by the next word, testing. Testing. You may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. So judgment and guilt are there. Just don't allow them to handicap you. Don't allow comparison to be that thief of joy in your life.